Good afternoon, welcome to my channel. I will be reading a short story in a short while based on 5 random words, but first I just want to remind you that I'm running a competition to win a signed copy of my forthcoming short story collection, Running Coyote and Fallen Star. And all you have to do is send me, you can do it in the comments to this video if you like, 4 or 5 random words, verbs, nouns, adjectives or adverbs that you might find interesting. I'm going to put them all in a hat, and when I do my 100th story, I'm going to pull 5 random words out of this hat from whoever submitted them, and anyone's word that I pull out of the hat, they will win a prize, a signed copy of the book. So anyway, it's worth doing. It'll take you 1 minute. Ideally subscribe to the channel first and hit like, and maybe even share it with some others who might want to enter. But yeah, please do that. Yeah, what can I say? It's free books, free stuff. Yeah, so this is a short story based on 5 random words, not drawn from a hat, but drawn from textfixer.com. And the words are, and this is story number 92, and it's called The Pearl and the Snail. The curlicue of paint describing the moon was placed with such a briskly efficient flick of the wrist that Queen Meandra drew a sharp breath, alerting the elderly artist to her presence. He swivelled on the high ladder with an agility that belied his 70-plus years. "Watching for long?" he said, with a smile that crinkled his features into a walnut shell flecked with pigment. "Not really. Wondering when you'd add the moon," she said, suddenly shy without knowing why. Tomorrow should be 25 after all, a third of a way through a life of reasonable duration. "I consider it a full moon, but I think the crescent's so much more poignant," the artist mused, surveying his work. His sliver of white peeped out between the spidery branches of a wintry forest, at the edge of a meadow through which wound a muddy track. It carried the eye, circuitously, towards a distant city of slender spires. "Where is that place?" Meandra asked, half hoping he'd made it up. "Via Notte, by the wayward shore," the muralist said. "Other side of the Tenemouth forest," he added, as if any of those places meant anything to her. A note of nostalgia had entered the artist's voice, and Meandra thought she knew why. The iron fortress where they both now stood was a magnificent architectural feat, perched high on the flinty summit of Mount Cranach. But it was a place entirely lacking in decorous spires and green meadows traversed by traders' caravans. This fantastical landscape was the antithesis of the barren palace that had become her prison. "It can't last," Meandra thought. "I'll leave him one day." She was thinking about her husband, the increasingly dour King Edmund, who'd wooed her away from her farmland upbringing 7 years prior. The then Prince Edmund's horse had stumbled while he was hunting boar in the woods by the river. Edmund had been thrown against a tree. He'd limped back to her father's farm, and Meandra had applied a poultice to his wounded temple, and noted how longingly he gazed upon her. Edmund's attentions had felt romantic and exciting back then, particularly when he'd returned a few days later to present her with a beautiful sable pony and ask her to ride out with him. How quickly the idyll had turned to tedium. The prince's father died shortly after they married, and Edmund was required to ascend the throne, removing himself and Meandra to the Iron Fortress, the seat of power and prestige in the Upper Kingdom. Since there had been several attempts on his life of late, the king rarely left the fortification. In the past year, her husband had grown melancholy and surly. Edmund had also failed to get her with child, partly why he now battled so many would-be usurpers. No heir to the slate-grey throne. Queen Meandra, as she seldom considered herself, would often linger in the throne room watching the muralist, who now worked by the flickering light of 2 immense braziers. Their leaping flames seemed to animate the branches of the painted forest, making it come alive in an imagined conflagration. Meandra left the muralist in the brazier's warmth and walked back to her chamber. She had a book of poetry to read and a lonely night ahead. Glancing across the battlements between the Queen's Tower and the King's chambers, she could see torches burning brightly and huddled silhouettes perusing maps. If tonight followed form, the king would be discussing war strategies with his councillors into the small hours. Meandra would not receive his visitation tonight. She found herself entirely unable to concentrate on her poems as the tallow dwindled and the candles guttered in the draughts, forcing their fingers through rattling shutters. Meandra's thoughts kept returning to the painter's path, snaking across the meadow towards a distant citadel, a place of mystery and excitement she might never see. Damn! Meandra had absent-mindedly broken the string of pearls she'd been playing with. Several pearls cascaded onto her lap. She swept them onto the bed as she removed the necklace. One intrepid pearl bounced onto the floorboards and rolled beneath the table towards a dark corner. Meandra raced after it, arresting its progress just before it collided with a tiny intruder, a snail with an iridescent blue and pink shell working its way along the damp boards. Meandra had never seen a snail shell so pretty. She lowered a candle to see it better. The illumination made the creature retreat into its portable home. The hues of the snail shell reminded her of the colours streaking the muralist's whiskery face. She thought of the backpack he wore when he arrived a week ago to work on the grand wall behind the thrones. That was his snail shell, containing all his worldly goods and his freedom. The muralist had told her he rode from commission to commission, moving from castle to hamlet to city to monastery, painting, dreaming, strolling and thinking. She only now realised two things. Firstly, she didn't know the aged artist's name. Secondly, she did know that the painter lived exactly the kind of life she longed for. She didn't love Edmund, and never had. Meandra had loved the notion of a princess's life, imagining it being full of adventure and new horizons. She'd only seen one horizon since becoming queen, a row of slate-grey teeth against a sky as pale as her pallor. Could she, like the snail, carry her world upon her back, follow the muralist's lead and strike out for adventure? The question answered itself. Meandra, heart pounding with excitement, wrote 2 letters, sealed them, then made a small bundle of her clothing, poetry books, quill pens and a few items of food from the scullery. The fortress's denizens were either slumbering or deep in debate in the council chamber. She left the first note on Edmund's throne and the second on the muralist's ladder. Inside the second envelope she placed the pearl necklace, in payment for the backpack she was borrowing. At the foot of the spiral steps, exiting the Queen's Tower, was a night watchman called Cedric. An inveterate drunk, he could never last a night before lulling himself to a stupor with crab-apple liquor. Tonight proved no exception, evidently. Shoes in hand, Meandra crept barefoot past the snoring delinquent, lifted the heavy wooden latch to the stables and snuck in to find Rosehip, her pony. As she saddled him and whispered gently in his ear to keep him calm, Meandra thought about the snail hidden in the front pocket of the backpack. It only seemed fair that she took the mollusk with her. After all, along with the mystery muralist, whom she discovered was named Amarand, his name stitched neatly into the front flap of the backpack, Mr. Snail had been the inspiration for her rebellion. She'd find him a suitable cabbage patch along the way. Taking one final look up at the towering edifice that had been her home and jail since she turned 18, Meandra set out on the rocky path towards an unknowable future of unending possibilities. I thank you. Yes, it was fun writing that one. It just sort of sprang into mind from the image, from the collision of a snail and a pearl. Actually, when you think about it, a pearl is created from inside another, is it a mollusk? I don't know. Anyway, whatever an oyster is. And on that note, I shall leave you. Thanks for listening. Do remember to enter the competition. Just jot down a few interesting words for me. And yeah, I'll see you again very soon.